What if your retention problem isn't compensation, flexibility, or career paths, but parenting stress that you never measured? In 2026, organizations are winning top talent. They're treating working parent stress and as a critical element in their performance strategy. So welcome to the People Strategy Forum, where we turn complex people challenges into leadership clarity. And I'm Sam Reeve, your host and CEO of CompTeam, where we help organizations design people systems that earn trust and sustain high performance. Today's topic is the hidden driver of retention: how supporting working parents builds high performance cultures. And our guest today is Dr. Rosina McAlpine, CEO of Win-Win Parenting and a work and family well-being expert. She helps organizations reduce psychosocial risk, boost engagement, and strengthen retention by supporting working parents in practical and measurable ways. And here's why this matters. More than half of working parents report ending their day mentally and physically exhausted. And I've been there. I know how it feels when you are completely spent and then you come home to your smiling family and you have nothing else to give. So, over a third say that it's increasingly difficult to stay motivated. And this is an important feature that we have to address. And when this becomes left unnoticed, it becomes a retention risk hiding in plain sight. So today we explore how leaders move from good intentions to real systems that protect well-being and performance. So please welcome Dr. Rosina McAlpine.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here and share ideas so that we can have happy, healthy, productive workforce.
For sure. Well, thanks for joining us today. Now, Dr. Rosina, as we dive into the topic here, I would like to start with the first thing. I mean, and it's probably not too hard for me to understand, but can you take us through the journey that led you to where you are today? What experiences in your career and work life led you to helping families and businesses in this way?
I think I echo your sentiment when you said, from personal experience, being a working parent, our son is now 18 years old. So I've been through all the ages and stages from newborn right through to toddler to teenager. And of course, at various stages, it's had a significant impact on my physical and mental health, sleepless nights, guilt, the pressures from work and home, resulting in overwhelm. Just the challenge of raising another human being for over 2 decades now. How can you be your best at work when you've got no support at work to manage the two largest domains in life? So I'd start with the journey as being personal. Then, when I was back at work, one of the things that I was an associate professor at the University of Sydney, and I was on sabbatical at the University of San Diego working with a whole group of PhD students. And the topic we were working on was work, family, gender equality in organizations. And what we saw was, at that time, it was over a decade ago now, there were these programs, wellbeing programs, that were being put into organizations, but they were not programs that working parents could benefit from. So there were wellbeing intentions, but the outcomes weren't coming through. So just a quick example, how do you say to a working parent who's got a toddler hanging off their leg, go and take some time out, or go and, go to the gym when you've got caring responsibilities? And that's when the epiphany came. I'm going to start win-win parenting and create programs, well-being programs that actually support working parents to manage work and family life. So now, over a decade, we've seen, organizations, from small organizations to large. We work with all levels of government, and we now see the impact, what difference it makes in the organization when working parents are actually supported. And as we, close this little first introduction, Recently, we put together a Closing the Gap guide on why supporting working parents is so important, and I really appreciate the opportunity you and I are going to talk through that. And the reason why I did that is because when you look at Australian data, you look at international data, working parents have the highest levels of stress when you compare them to non-working parents, the highest rates of burnout, the lowest mental health scores, the highest rates of turnover. And so when you look at all of that, you've got to say to yourself, we need to do something about it. And that something is, number one, get the data in your organization. Number two, train your lovely, caring leaders to be able to support working parents. Number three, get those targeted programs that could make a difference. Number four, programs and policies are one level of support, but actually, when you have a truly family friendly workplace culture, individuals are not scared to take that flexibility to enjoy those programs. And finally, when we monitor and report on it, we know what gets measured can get managed. So that's the 5 steps that all of this has kind of led me to here.
Yes, and we're going to go through each of those 5 steps in detail so our audience can get the full power of the program here. But I remember, and this is as I started out. This is truly personal to me because I remember the days when I had my first child, and I felt, well, it was very overwhelming for both of us. I was in a job at the time where if I made a single mistake, it could cost the company millions of dollars just by not having the decimal in the right spot or mistyping something, and it was so it was very high pressure. And then, of course, when our firstborn came along, I mean, there was this sleepless nights as we're trying to figure out how to parent and what to do. And I felt incredibly guilty by going out and sleeping on the couch, and while leaving my wife to fend with this new little one. And but I felt like, geez, I had to, if I got fired, we would be in big trouble, and so it was a lot of stress, a lot of stress. And so thankfully that I can see that this is gaining ground, and thank you for bringing this important issue to businesses and so forth.
Wellbeing programs is nice to have, but actually, we know for decades now that if individuals are not thriving holistically, mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, they're not doing well at work. And the same is true for working parents. So you can't just say it's a nice to have, because that interface between work and family life is one of the biggest stresses anybody can experience, like you and I have both talked about. So they're missing the data, the data that we talked about. If we, just simply look at the data in their organization and outside, we'd see working parents are not doing very well. And what that means is that leaders are not taking care of their responsibilities when it comes to psychosocial safety. If working parents have high rates of stress, high rates of mental health illness, high rates of turnover, high rates of burnout, then we're not creating a safe environment where employees' mental, physical, emotional health through, fair work, being able to meet all of the demands. And the final thing they're not remembering is, when we look at the research on parental burnout and workplace burnout, we know there is what's called a bidirectional relationship. So, in other words, inevitably, if you're feeling burnt out in the parenting domain, that is going to creep into burnout in the workplace domain. And the same. If you're really burnt out with really overstretched timelines and workloads, that's going to impact parental burnout. So we can't just say it's a nice to have. There's so many reasons why, if we want a high performing workforce with caring responsibilities, we need to do something about it.
Yes, and so it's clear that the cost to an organization, this comes in a lot of ways. And as you mentioned, burnout is a big one that's happening right now across the world. I mean, where there's organizations that are feeling a higher rate of burnout There's a lot of things that are pouring into that, of course, but and also as you mentioned that there can be higher rates of absenteeism. As people are trying to balance their responsibilities, and ultimately can lead to turnover. So there's a lot of impacts that this can have on an organization.
So true.
But let's reframe this and start going through your steps. Now, I think that the first piece that you mentioned is that you really need to have the data. So, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So what we say is that if you don't know what the issues are or the risks are, how can you mitigate them? And generally, when we do those general risk assessments, we're not targeting the issues that are for each different segment of our organisation. Now, working parents generally make up anywhere from around 30%, about a third, right up to two-thirds in some industries. There'll be much higher rates of working parents, particularly in government, for example. It gives a good, stable place to work. So we have to segment our data, first of all, to make sure that working parents across all levels, we want to know wherever they are in the organisation. And that's when we can use those targeted surveys, focus groups to uncover the unique stresses. One of the things I want to stress here is not to stress your parents out
Hmm.
doing that, because we want it to be confidential, that they feel safe. And that's why, sometimes getting data from the EAP, Employment Assistance Provider, can help, where what are the things that are presenting most, right? When they're going to the counsellors and for extra support. And oftentimes the top three relate to family, parenting, workplace, and then also personal stress from all of that. Once we've got some data on all the risks, what are the big risks, like workload, like support, like work family conflict, we're then able to map it against, workplace health and safety codes, because we do want to make sure our employees are safe. And then after you do that, you're in a really good position to say, well, I've got data on the problems. What programs have we got in place that actually address those problems? And if the answer is none, then you got a big job. If the answer is some, then good work. You've made a start. And then finally, so important that we document that. It's not a one-off survey that we put in a drawer somewhere. They've got to be documented, prioritized, and put somewhere where we're saying, look, this is our organizational risk register. And these are the things we're working on to make sure that when we do a risk assessment, when we do gather the data, we know what are the risks, what we're doing to support them, and where we're up to with that.
So it's really important to take that working parent risk assessment. Is that delivered directly into just to working parents, or is that something that goes across the entire organization?
Absolutely. When it's a working parent risk assessment, then you're specifically targeting them, because we might have other surveys for other large groups.
Mhm.
So there might be, for example, groups in the organization that are fly in, fly out, or do you know what I mean? So you can say they're going to have unique risks, just like the working parents. Another group that are actually quite at risk at the moment, we know from data, is early entry into the workforce, when you're first coming in, with, stress, mental health challenges, for our youth that we know they've experienced. So by segmenting our organization, we can target the right questions. But as I said, one of the things is we do want confidentiality. We do want them to feel safe. So we're not, going in there with a heavy hand to try and gather this data, but really from that family friendly culture, we realize the job you're doing is amazing. You're working at home and you're trying to support, the economy through your work. We want to make sure that we're identifying how we can best support you to achieve in both domains.
Yeah, so really ensuring that you have a good assessment protocol, so people feel like they're not singled out, and then also that we're targeting the correct groups with the right questions. Now, with your working parent risk assessment, does it create an action plan once you're done?
Exactly. So once you know the stress factors, that's the best thing. Once you've got these are the things that are causing problems. So for example, time pressure, emotional fatigue, work-life conflict, all of those things, everyone experiences them. So I'm not trying to single working parents out in the sense that everyone can be time pressured, emotional fatigue, and we want obviously workplaces to work for everybody. However, we know that work-life conflict disproportionately impacts working parents. So we want to make sure that, we identify that if you are an individual and at the end of the day you go home and you can relax because you do not have caring responsibilities, you're in a very different position to someone who goes home and the home life begins, that second shift begins. And then if setting up an early meeting the next morning and you haven't had any sleep because you've had a sleepless night with 6 kids, the work-life conflict is absolutely different to someone who is caring for themselves or in a partnership, caring for another. And again, we can also add uh, people who are caring for elderly parents. We know
Right.
now there's this sandwich generation where a lot of people who have children are also now caring for their parents. So they're getting the work-life conflict from, both ends.
Yes, yes, for sure. So let's move on to the next step of this. So embed those family friendly leadership practices. So you've said that managers are the key in motivating employees, but what are the top three manager behaviors that mostly influence whether working parents thrive or disengage?
So the first thing is we need our HR leaders to be trained to watch out for early warning signs.
Hmm.
If we start to see changes in personality or performance, things like emotional outbursts, conflict with colleagues, not turning up to meetings or not coming on camera, like yes, at the meeting, but no camera on, no smiling face to say, yes, I'm here and I'm doing well. Missing deadlines and not their same happy self. So, one of the things we need is HR leaders to feel confident and trained to look for those signs. The next thing that's really important is, and I've seen this in action myself, when leaders step up and share their own challenges, when they role model flexibility. I mean, imagine getting an email from your manager saying, I'm coming into work late this morning because my child's getting a prize at school and I'm going to do that. So if you need me, text me. Don't phone me, but text me. I can answer any, emergencies through text, but I'll be in a little later. When leaders role model that flexibility, when they share that, yes, I'm one of you. I understand your challenges. Now, I get it. Not all leaders have children or caring responsibilities. I get that. So then it's lead with empathy. So try and find out what it would be like, or just imagine, like, ask yourself the questions. What would it be like if I didn't just have to get myself out of the house in the morning, feed myself, I had to feed a few others and get them to school, and then I had to get there? And then what happens if I get a call from school about my child needs me? Starting to get that empathy so that you can lead with empathy. So, and then the final thing, and the third thing I'll talk about because that's our top three, is that open communication. And I don't mean be there as a counselor or a coach. That's the job of EAP. That's the job of others. But just what if you could have a chat with your uh, team saying things like, what would make your workday easier right now? Or what are the key challenges you've got in, whether it's in timing or work deadlines or whether it's workload or work family conflict? Because when that kind of question is asked, even just the acknowledgement that, yes, I've got more on my plate than just your demands for what I need at work, that can create a powerful cultural shift where there's this trust between manager and employee to be able to talk about things rather than hide it. And that's when it's insidious. That's when it's, that cycle that we get, like you said, from disengagement to overwhelm to not turning up and then eventually maybe turnover.
Right. And so, what's the best way for leaders to support or to help train their managers? I mean, of course, they need to understand how to have effective communication. They need to understand the appropriate amount of empathy, and then also to establish guardrails or boundaries of what is appropriate and when should they hand off to the next expert, or provide support to another expert. What are your thoughts there?
I think what you're talking about, which is why I lead with empathy for leaders.
Mm,
Can you imagine what it's like? And I know I've managed very diverse teams. When you're trying to make sure everybody is supported, and you might not know those circumstances. It might not be something in your remit, like, managing a person with a child with additional needs, managing a person who's got a physical or other type of additional needs or disability. You know, there's a big range that individual managers are managing. So when it comes to proactively supporting parents, really important to get the education under their belt. So understanding the risks, and that's why that first piece of risk assessment is so important. That's why that open communication where you're finding out what's going on, it doesn't blindside you, is
mhm.
important. But like you said, there has to be a line where you go, okay, I now know this. I can refer you on to the help that you need. This is, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a counselor, so I can't help you with that. And I think that's where the training comes in. That the training comes in, know the risks, know how to have those conversations, know where your limit is and where the professionals are. And the big thing here is we absolutely know that there is a, what can I say? There's a benefit to the leader once they've got this, because they've got motivated, loyal, focused, productive employees. That is much easier to manage than someone who is disengaged and is combative and is overwhelmed and is going to leave. And I'd like to leave just a little quote, if I might, hear one of the ones that I've pulled out from our programs. And it said, "My workplace offering this program makes me proud to work here. Seeing my employer invest in these sessions helps me to feel loyal and engaged." And that's exactly what we want. So when managers are proactively supporting, saying, "Hey, did you know we've got this program? Hey, do you know that we've got EAP? Hey, do you know that we could move that meeting to not at school drop off or pick up time?" You've got that loyalty engagement, and that's going to make such a big difference to the workload of the leader as well. There's the win-win again.
Yes. Well, I like what you said about the starting with the assessment, because, of course, the assessment can also give us the important information about the different populations within our employee group. I mean, such as those that are parents, those that have that are in the care of elderly parents, and those people with different needs. And this helps us go to the next step of tailoring our well-being programs. So, can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, one of the things that we can talk about is that we know that individuals want programs and support even over a pay rise. We know that. And
Mm,
I've got some data that said, you know, 37% of working parents would prefer better wellbeing support over a 10% pay rise, right? That's just
yeah.
huge. So, how do you put those programs in place? Well, the first thing is you don't you put in programs that address the specific challenges. So, if it's managing work and family, it could be on routines and rituals for parents, for employees with children or with caring responsibilities, not, how do you get yourself organized? It could be about how do we help children learn routines and rituals so that it is easier at home. It could be, we know that one of the biggest reasons individuals leave work is their children's mental health. Now, oftentimes, mental health programs in organizations are for the adult, not for the adult who is managing a child, raising a child, and has children with mental health challenges. So, that can be a topic that's important.
Mhm.
Also, when we have the risk assessment, things like we know that bullying, about 30% of kids are bullied. We know that there's a very high percentage of parents who say, I cannot get my kids off social media, I cannot get them off screens. So these are the kinds of help that make such a difference. So, first of all, targeted programs in the sense that they're not, they're they're across all the different risks, but also that they are long lasting.
Mm.
I kind of joke, but it's not a joke. When organizations do the one program on, family friendly day, or, we're going to do one for World Children's Day or something like that. It's like that's the be all and end all. We've done that now, tick. You're working parents, you got this. We did the one program, it's all good. But we know that that one program goes away, but the children don't go away. The children are there in, day out, and for a long extended period of time. So having programs that deal with the different stages, you know, parental leave and return to work, particularly vulnerable time. Then you got toddlers, then you got school age, then you got teenagers. And, you don't want, I always again joke about this, you don't want someone who's raising a toddler to be in a session with, you know, parents of teenagers going, oh, the drugs, the alcohol. And they're like, I just can't get my kid to eat anything other than white. Don't tell me about drugs and alcohol.
I know.
I don't want to know about that.
Yeah.
So when we're tailoring these programs, they've got to be targeted to the right area, not to think of, working parents as a chunk. They're not a chunk. They're a very diverse group. Secondly, we want them longevity. Third, we want to make sure we can measure. We want feedback. We want engagement. We want to know that people are using the resources. And so in our programs, we set it up such that you have live where you can ask questions and answers, and they're during work hours to show we value you. We're going to get you to do these programs during work hours. It doesn't have to be an outside another thing that you've got to do outside work, but we value you. So we often run our programs during work hours. But if, let's say, you can't make it, we've also got on demand replays, resources, podcasts, downloadable handouts. So there's this real flexibility in being able to access. So I hope that's answered.
Yeah, that's very good. I mean, and I like the fact that you pointed out that we need to. You can't just have the checkbox attitude of, "Oh, we did that training, boom," and you're moving on. You need to create lasting change and ensuring things that are really digested into the culture. And then another thing I want to reiterate is that because I am by trade, I'm a compensation expert. I help companies put pay programs in multinationally, and of course, when you said that 37% of working parents would prefer better well-being support over a 10% pay increase, that really took my breath away. I mean, that really points out the ROI of having a program like this in place. I mean, if those stats are true, I mean, the ROI of this program is huge. And so I think that's really important for our leaders out there that are listening in to really take point on this initiative. It's really being listening to your people, understanding their unique issues, and they change as we all grow, right? So and we just need to make sure that we are consistently monitoring that and being adaptive. But that takes us to our next step here, Dr. Rosina, is building a supportive workplace culture. And so, can you tell us a little bit about that, the steps involved in doing that initiative?
Yeah, I love when, we were having our chat before this podcast. One of the things that you said to me was, policies alone don't shift culture.
Hmm.
We know that policies are so important. So I'm never saying we don't have policies. Of course we do. But actually understanding, undertaking, implementing, using, adapting are more important. So we know that many, behaviors might unintentionally penalize working parents. And so what we want to do is we want to say, okay, what are the risks? One of the risks is scheduling meetings when parents have got to pick up or drop off their kids. Being very mindful during school holidays. School holidays can be such a challenging time for working parents. They've got to get their kids into holiday programs. If they've got older children, monitoring what they are doing. We know what teenagers can get up to if we're at work and they're at home with their mates. We know it's not time to set big milestones during the school holidays. We know when they're set. Managers know that. So it's a policies and procedures and understanding that we go, okay, our culture is family friendly. So we now know that in order to be family friendly, you've got priorities for your family at certain times of the day, at certain times of the year. We know you've got all these many challenges. So we've put flexibility in place and please use it. We've got managers who have KPIs on working parents. So make sure that you do have a manager who will listen and direct you in the right direction, that is monitoring your physical, social, and mental well-being and directing you when you need it. So when, people have employers that are truly family friendly. There's a different culture. You come to work, you're focused and productive because you know there are leaders that care, there are policies and procedures in place that support and protect you to not be overwhelmed at work so that you can have that, work-life interface that doesn't stress you, doesn't um, affect your mental health, and it doesn't affect your family life as well.
I love that. The important thing is that if we have a culture, a family supportive culture, then the nature of unfairness around uh, of around these special initiatives of scheduling meetings and thinking about that kind of goes away because we're thinking about a holistic support group, and that's part of our company culture overall. So, would you agree?
I agree, and I think that's the important to say we're applying transparent criteria. So we're ensuring workload and flexibility is all about performance, not about a concession, not, oh, you poor working parents, we're going to give you a concession. No, it'd be the same for individuals who are in FIFO, fly in, fly out roles, individuals who are new to the organization and still haven't kind of got their feet with managing
Yeah.
work and family life, right? So the whole aim, we want to say, we want our whole workforce to thrive.
Mm.
And that sometimes means we don't equally give everyone the same training because one doesn't help the other, right?
Yeah.
So if you give a new employee who doesn't have children training on how to care for a new baby, that is not helpful.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
same way, right? So that's all we're trying to say. We're trying to say, let's be transparent and say we want every one of our employees to thrive, and we understand that some situations, some groups of our, employees have different challenges that we have not accounted for.
Yeah, so we should definitely customize our onboarded programs, our training programs, so that they're relevant, and so our people don't fall asleep during training, for sure.
I love that. That's very
Yes. So for our listeners out there, if you lead leaders, I mean, of course, I mean, I want you to share this episode and ask them a simple question. How can we improve our support for working parents? How can we be more nimble about the needs of our workforce? I mean, I think that's something that we should all take as an action plan for sure. Now, Dr. Rosina, the final step, as you mentioned, is really monitoring the success, and this really goes for any program. You should really monitor the success of the program and report on its impact. So, what are the best ways to do that for your programs?
In the early days, because we're just embedding the programs, what we're looking for in the early days are number one, engagement
Mm.
in the program, feedback on the program, use of the resources live and also recorded. So in the early days, it's like, have we hit the mark? Are people able to access? What's the feedback saying? So I'd like to give a couple of, quotes, if I may, here,
Yeah.
because that the don't just get measures of, 50% of our working parents turned up. What we need, or, another 30% access the resources and access the replays, but get the actual outcomes of what you were trying to achieve. So I'm going to share just a few, and these are very typical. So this is not like I just picked one. We've, been working with hundreds and thousands of working parents, and these are the common things they'll say. So balancing work and family life strategies really helped me cope. So now we're hearing, we're not having that overwhelm and stress. It's coping. The strategies for creating routines at home while managing a busy workload have been invaluable. So there you go. Okay, I targeted that work family conflict. The next one, I love this one. As a single parent, I often feel torn between work and home. This program makes me feel supported, not guilty. So the other thing is, working parents, it's a strange thing, and I'm sure you've felt it from time to time. We always feel alone, like we're the only human that's experiencing this. And it says, good to know other parents are facing the same challenges. It makes me feel less isolated. So these are dealing with all of those stress points. I love this one too. This has given me the confidence to speak with my manager about flexibility to better balance work and parenting. So if we give them the courage and the tools and the ways to speak with management. And the last one I wanted to talk to is this one. My employer providing this program demonstrates a genuine commitment to a family-friendly workplace culture. This is exactly the type of initiative that shows an organization understands the reality of working parents. So that's the kind of feedback you want to gather. In how is this impacting you? What are the stresses that it's been able to, help you overcome? Last one here, this has been very helpful for managing my family life, which has a direct impact on my ability to work well. Now we know that, but it's nice to hear it from the
Yeah.
person saying, I've got this now. So I think initially we want to focus on the program. Is it working? Is it targeting the stresses? But over time, as it is embedded, you want to see changes in the culture of that organization, measurements of culture, measurements of motivation, and measurements of well-being, lower mental health scores, higher mental health scores, lower mental health stress, less EAP, for working parents constantly going to get the help, because parents are going, no, no, I've got this. I don't need to see a counselor. I just get those resources on bullying. I can manage it. I get that on mental health. I can manage it. And of course, then the big ones are productivity, managers seeing deadlines being met, no mistakes, uh, customers being won, all the things that you want to see in terms of productivity. And of course, the big one is retention. We know how expensive it is if you're losing your staff. Number one, so a team member leaves because they're overwhelmed or stressed. So all the other team members have to pick up the slack. So now we've already stressed out, not just, everyone's stressed. Then we've got to find a person, we've got to pay for, a recruiter to get a new person, costs a lot of money. Then we got to get them in the team, and now they've got to find new bonds, form new connections and partnerships. They've now got to be retrained, and all of that has now disrupted everything because you lost one person because there was no proactive support for that human to keep them on deck. So I think there's a very big case that we know from other literatures that say targeted effective well-being programs have ROI of 2 and 3 and sometimes 4 times in terms of productivity and cost. And we also know that the ones that are in place longer have higher ROI for the obvious
Yes.
reason the change has been embedded. So it was a very long-winded answer, but I think that's how we genuinely can measure ROI over time.
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure. What gets measured gets managed. And when I can say one thing is, and I know a lot of the turnover statistics very accurately, is that at a minimum, if you lose one person, and at a minimum, it's a 33% cost on the organization, from hiring, from onboarding, from retraining. And that's at a minimum. That's our lower level jobs. And it just gets more expensive as you go up. So the ROI in a program like this is undeniable. But, Dr. Rosina, on a personal note, what weekly leadership habit would you recommend every executive adopt to better support working parents?
This is going to sound a little strange, but I would actually recommend that every leader looks after themselves first,
Mm,
first and foremost. And I say that because leaders are stretched as well. They've got their KPIs for productivity, they've got their, trying to manage a large workforce, oftentimes, and a very diverse workforce. So oftentimes they're stretched, and many times they're probably hearing this and going, I'm a working parent and a carer as well, and I'm a leader, so now there's this really big responsibility. So step number one is fill your bucket so that you've got something to offer. So I would say a good strategy is check in on your own personal, physical, mental, social, emotional well-being. Once you've got that, I always say when you are happy and fulfilled inside and you've got energy, it bubbles out. You can't help but be a good leader, right?
yeah.
You can't help but be inspirational. So once you are in a really good position to lead because you're leading yourself, then you're in a good position to find out, well, what are the stresses and how can I overcome them? So I would say take care of yourself so that you're in a best position to support others by learning and leading with empathy.
Yeah, I think that's the one great learning we've got from airline travel is to put on your own mask first before you help others, right? We cannot,
Exactly.
yeah, we cannot help from a point of weakness. So it's important for leaders to take care of themselves first, for sure. So, for our listeners out there, if this conversation has helped, please subscribe, rate, and share with a coworker that really needs to hear about how how to help working parents in their area. This can be a super powerful way to really get that trust and commitment from your people. But I'd like to recap all of this today by saying that we've reframed working parent support as a strategic lever, not a accommodation. So the formula is quite clear. We need to start with assessing risk, equipping managers, tailor programs, embed culture, and then, as Dr. Rosina said, it's important to measure the results because the impact of these programs will truly surprise you with the amount of an engagement and cost savings you can see. When leaders address the stress parents carry, performance doesn't decline, it strengthens. And so I think that we need to really be thankful of Dr. Rosina here for bringing this up and for the support that you spread across the industry. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And please let the listeners know that the guide is available freely. That's free. And there's free people leader training on my website. That's how much it matters, that we train our people leaders and support working parents.
Oh, that's great. And so, Dr. Rosina, is there any other guidance or support or things that are going on this year that you want to highlight?
Yes, I'm very data driven. So
Hmm.
at the moment, we are working on a series of white papers to give us the most up-to-date information around the world on working parents, and we're looking at things like interactions between, we know we're starting to see in these preliminary results that the higher the support from a manager, the better the mental health, the lower the support from a manager, the poorer the mental health. So we're going to be able to share from countries all over the world, Europe, Asia, US, Australia, New Zealand. So stay tuned. We've got a series of working papers coming out that will really inform your wellbeing strategies when it comes to working parents and support you to ask the right questions so that you can get that engagement, support, and family-friendly workplace culture in your organization. So watch this space.
Well, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing that research.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and to all our listeners out there, please join us again next week on the People Strategy Forum. All right, take care, and we'll see you soon.